All right, everybody. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to our virtual info session. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come in as well. I'm Wade Cleveland. I'm going to kind of moderate our way through this whole thing, and I'm joined by Keval from the Western REN. I'm communications coordinator with the REN, by the way, and Keval is our BusinessNow lead, as well as 4 different consultants who are going to kind of tell you about themselves, and then we're going to have kind of an open panel discussion. I'm pretty sure everybody's mics are muted other than ours, and if you have questions, there's a Q&A button up on the top, and feel free to use that. I'm opening it up right now, and if you have any questions, feel free to. And really, once we get through the initial part of it, we'll have Keval tell a little bit about what's going on with the REN and how this works in terms of the BusinessNow plan and this AI part of our AI and CI. And we love anagrams here. AI, of course, is, you know what AI is in digital transformation. CI is our continuous improvement program, and she'll tell you a little bit about that. And our 4 different consultants will tell you a little bit about themselves as well. And we have online with us, and thank you guys very much for doing this, Trish Calder from Barrington Consulting, Donnie Chisholm from IPSG Technology, Brennan Kilfoil from Kilfoil Consulting, and Robert Newcombe from AI First Consulting. So I'm going to start things off by inviting Keval to tell us a little bit about BusinessNow and CI, and if any businesses are interested in kind of being a part of this, how they can do that. So, Keval.
Thanks, Wade. So as Wade said, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Keval. I am the BusinessNow lead at the Western REN. And for those unfamiliar with the Western REN, it's a regional economic development organization, and we work across municipal boundaries, so from Bear River and Digby all the way to Clyde River and Barrington. And it's our job to support businesses and create an investment-friendly environment in Western Nova Scotia. So our BusinessNow program specifically is designed to help connect businesses within our region with the right tools, supports, people, and whether that's, navigating red tape, accessing funding, or exploring opportunities. And so through our work directly with businesses, we were able to identify the need for our continuous improvement projects. And our continuous improvement projects, were funded by ACOA and ourselves, the Western REN, and it helps connect businesses with vetted consultants who work directly with your team and to hopefully improve operations. And we've had pretty good success with that. And because our CI projects are hands-on, collaborative, and the consultants work directly in the business to identify inefficiencies, reduce waste, improve workflows, and these small changes can lead to real savings in time, cost, effort. So, and we're very, very fortunate to be able to subsidize our CI program 88% of the cost because the project is funded through COA, as I mentioned. So we know that digital tools and AI are now part of the conversation around efficiency, but it's not always clear where to start. And many businesses, especially rurally, it can feel like a full-time job, just to keep up with the changes. So, and that's why we wanted to add the digital transformation and AI focus to our CI projects for this fiscal. So that's kind of my spiel about the project. If you have any more questions after the session, please reach out and I'm happy to clarify anything and how the process works. But I can hand it back over to Wade and we can get going.
Okay. So one thing I want to mention, and you can find everything, if you go to our website, you can find all this anyway, but Keval can be reached via email by businessnow@westernren.ca. but you can find that. And what I'm going to do after this, everybody who registered for this, I will, this is being recorded and I'll send the recording so everybody can review it as you wish. So we're going to give our consultants a chance to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves and what they do. And I'm going to run off in order of what I have written down on my paper here so I don't miss anybody. Trish Calder, we'll begin with you, Trish, from Barrington Consulting.
Great. Well, I'm Trish Calder, as you mentioned. I'm an associate partner at Barrington Consulting, and I lead our operational performance services practice. So we specifically work with businesses across, a variety of levels of maturity and industries. And really what we're focused on is improving performance, reducing friction or pain points in your business and processes. And more now, as AI is being adopted and as tech solutions are becoming more prevalent, we're really we're pave the way through process improvement for the smart sort of scalable use of technologies like AI. So, we were asked to share, each of us, a little bit of an insight, a practical insight, and just based on the work that we've been doing in our practice at our firm, I wanted to share with you the single most kind of, important thing that I think is really foundational to those businesses who are exploring AI. And I think it really depends on where you are in the maturity spectrum, sort of. If you're more emerging and sort of starting to explore AI as a solution for your business versus if you're more mature, you've already leveraged AI solutions in different ways. What is the first thing that you might do as an organization? So I wanted to talk a little bit today about what I've seen and sort of the importance of data in being foundational to AI and the use of AI. So as you'll probably all know and agree, AI isn't going to replace judgment. We don't want it to replace people necessarily, but it should complement the people. It should really enhance our decision making as organizations. And so in order to do that, it really requires good data to feed into it in order to support that. And so I think whether you're kind of on that emerging end of the spectrum or more mature on that spectrum, data is still really integral to this. And so I would say for those organizations who are maybe smaller, beginning in that exploratory stage of AI, you might say something like, this is kind of the gap I've seen when I work with organizations who kind of fit that description, is they'll typically say, we don't really have data or we don't leverage our data. So I would kind of counter that to say, you have lots of data, you're just not capturing it effectively. So in those cases, what I would recommend is that you're going to start to capture data. Examples that I've seen are, how many customer calls you receive, service requests, how long it takes to resolve those, what issues are coming up repeatedly for you. If you're not capturing that and documenting it, you're really missing out on the benefit of analyzing that data using analytical power of AI. So same thing goes for the sort of more mature end of the spectrum. So what I would typically see in more mature organizations is that they are, they may have lots of data, big data, but they're under leveraging that data in the use of AI. And so in those cases, you might see sort of more siloed data capture. So you might see, you don't have connected CRM and ERP systems and that kind of thing. They're speaking to each other and able to show how information and data cascades throughout organizations. And in those instances, we really want to connect data. The other thing is the consistency of data. We'll see examples of, lack of, a standard kind of naming convention or something like that, which really impedes your ability to analyze data. So things that they're still quite simple, but it really is preventing you from taking your AI solutions to the next level. So that to me is really sort of the key insight I wanted to share with you today is that data is really foundational to process insights, and that will support and be foundational to any AI solution. So data first, process kind of comes second, and then last will come your AI adoption or your AI scaling. So that's a little bit about me. Over to the next person, Wade.
Okay, thanks a lot, Trish. I appreciate that. Donnie, let's move to Donnie Chisholm. He's with IPSG Technology out of New Brunswick. I'm pretty sure you're not even in New Brunswick right now, aren't you? Did I overhear you telling everybody you were in Ottawa?
I'm traveling, yes. So, yeah, so IPSG Technology, we're a technology services company. We do a lot of work. We do experts on demand. And for the last 7, 8 years, we've been doing a lot of digital transformation. So we work with a couple of programs. This program in New Brunswick called Digital Boost, which is about digital assessments, digital transformation for small and medium-sized business. We also work with the CDAP program, which is a federal program. So in the past 7, 8 years, we've done a lot of digital transformation assessments, roadmaps for small and medium-sized businesses. And recently, the last version of those programs are focused on AI opportunities. And I'll 100% agree with what Trish is saying. Data, it's all about data. You have to have your data, either in one place or talking to each other, so that you can, or clean at the very least, so that if you're going to implement any AI opportunities, it's based on good data. So it's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. Your data's not good, and you start to use an AI, tool, then you're just getting gobbledygook out of it, right? So so clean up your data is the first step in that. So, and then that goes for even digital transformation. I'm not even talking about AI. We're just looking at continuous improvement or process improvement or system modernization. It's getting your data to talk to each other so you have more, information available for making decisions on a timely matter. So, insights. So, we've been doing this for quite a while now, and what I would say is the digital transformation path is not as cumbersome or as threatening as it kind of seems in the beginning. So it can be simple things. There's simple things that you can do to get quick wins on it. You may have tools already that you can leverage. That's a little bit about us. Like I said, we've done a lot of data transformation, AI. We've got into a lot in the last year. We've done little things that can, for small and medium-sized businessmen. We're in the process of launching a fairly large one, which is for a small business, but it's a global business. So, as Trish said, I encourage you to, do a little research on AI. It's not it's for everybody, and it's not a future thing. It's now.
Excellent. Thank you, Donnie. I really appreciate that. Brennan, let's move to Brennan. Brennan Kilfoil is with Kilfoil Consulting. How are things going?
Sure. Thanks, Wade. And thanks everyone for having me. My name is Brennan Kilfoil. My company is Kilfoil Consulting, which is really just myself and a few other supporting roles. We're more of a CI focused, like continuous improvement piece. And what we really do is collaborate with businesses to improve their processes and how they manage them. As you can probably guess, this usually involves some type of digital transformation these days. But our approach really comes from a lot of time spent in big corporations and in small businesses. Like, I've managed teams of 100+ folks across the country in large sort of formal corporations, but also started businesses and built teams and processes from the ground up in construction, finance, and public-private partnerships too. So that, part of that is our approach in bringing what large organizations do well to small and medium-sized businesses, which is sort of a focus on process and value, sort of scrutinizing who does what and why, data-driven leadership, and alignment, which is kind of a buzzword, but really meaning do we have a good understanding of what our goals are for the organization, and are we aligning that sort of who does what and why with those broader goals? So having said that, who are our customers and what challenges do we help with? So our customers, and you all might sympathize with this, our customers usually have great people, they have decent technology, they're across various industries, and they have their own good ideas for improvement. Like, this usually isn't something that we see that's lacking with organizations, right? Challenges are usually related to things like growth, creating scalability and flexibility and managing that, whether it's by acquisition or market growth or what have you, new lines of business, new products, services. The big one for today, innovation. How do we get the most out of digital transformations? How do we get the most out of automation and AI and these tools? And lastly, there's challenges just around high performance. How do we maximize productivity and engagement and use data-driven insights to lead our teams and our processes? So usually our customers, what don't they have? They usually don't have generalists who work across the business and who have both the skills and the time to do these internal projects. The generalists are the owners and the senior leadership that are tied up and are working these things. That's where we can come in. They usually don't have a clear picture of what good looks like in small and medium-sized businesses. And this is that concept I mentioned earlier about bringing what large organizations do well into small and medium-sized business space, because some large organizations do some things really well and they figured some stuff out, and so we know what good looks like in all these different functions in parts of the business. And just another piece that customers usually are lacking is a rigorous approach. Like, how do we go about these projects? How do we go about figuring out AI or technology or process improvement or any of these things, so that we have confidence in investing our resources that we're going to do it effectively and efficiently? And that means we don't have confidence, we don't end up allocating those resources, we don't end up doing it, we don't end up following through and executing. So just a quick highlight of a couple of projects that we've done. In the seafood industry right now is an ongoing project. We're working with North America's largest shellfish grower and distributor to do pricing optimization and data integration. Nova Scotia Power, we worked with them over the last year on a really interesting project to address all the growth that's happening across Nova Scotia, particularly in the HRM with all these new buildings, unprecedented amount of cranes in the air and everything. Those are complicated for Nova Scotia Power to hook up. And so we essentially had to design a whole new process for their large customers. We work with professional services firms like engineering firms and law firms, standardizing processes and management practices to support and stabilize growth. Relevant to this conversation, one of our big projects last year was with Efficiency Nova Scotia, automating their largest residential program. You all might have been participants in that program to get subsidies on your heat pumps. That was a massive automation project. It had some elements of AI used as sort of an optimizing function in there too. We'll talk more about that in a second. And also, just another example is, in terms of small businesses, we work with a restaurant owners group who has 20, 25 different restaurant locations, and the project there was to integrate their operations across all these disparate locations and geography and systems and all this wild stuff, and get them aligned in one management system. So a few examples there. So shifting towards more of the focus for this morning, thoughts on technology and AI. All of our projects include these things to some degree or another, but generally, I want to point out a misconception I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit more, but the way I'm looking at this is there's two broad applications of AI, often sort of mixed and packaged together. Sort of light duty AI, whether it's generative AI or what have you, as a productivity optimizer. But then we have lots of use cases for what I'm calling heavy duty AI, which is something that's part of the core value creation of a business, like how we actually create and deliver our products and services. And those things can actually end up looking completely different in terms of accessibility for small and medium-sized businesses. It can look completely different in terms of what it means for strategic execution of your goals and how it fits in. We use both. So, and I guess the question is, how does this fit? So how do either of those fit in for you? And my lame answer is boring answer is, it really depends on your business. and humans are good at some things, technology at others, and where we find that crossroads is different depending on the business. So just a couple final thoughts here on that. Our focus really is on the continuous improvement part of the puzzle, which I think is a prerequisite step to the technology and AI piece. And the principle I operate under typically is that a problem well understood is already half solved, for those who've heard that one. And meaning, let's talk about your business. What are the goals? Who are your customers? What are the roles, processes? Where are the gaps? And how much opportunity is there? Because the sort of bad news part of the story is that you probably have some work to do first before you fully understand how these technology pieces are going to fit in, right? And the caution is with this, I like to say, is without this type of approach, if you start with tech, or if there's sort of if you're getting involved with tech sales, it's like one of these situations where you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So that's a caution we have to look out for. But being more optimistic, and the good news story, technology definitely fits into all your businesses somehow without even having, I can make that bet without having met you folks and learned about your organizations. But and the good news is there's lots of places to start, and this is, I guess, would be my actionable insight here. Lots of places to start without too much investment in time or money. Like pretty much everyone has Microsoft accounts, and you have savvy, smart folks working for you. Get a Copilot license, spend the $40 a month. Get a Power BI license, spend another $30 a month, and start exploring what the opportunities are. Like my headline here is there's so much to do with starting with what you have already, and so much progress you can make before we start thinking about writing checks for new technology and all stuff like this. And Trish alluded to some of that as well. So, just getting 1 or 2 users started on that sort of, few extra bucks a month path is huge, and it can help you start understanding opportunities. And then, of course, any of the folks on the call here this morning can help you take a step further when you're ready to take a step past that.
Excellent. Thank you, Brennan. That was excellent. I really appreciate it. Next, Robert Newcombe from AI First Consulting. Robert.
Great. Thanks, Wade. I'll keep the intro fairly quick because I know we got some good questions lined up here for the panelists, but I am a CEO and founder of AI First Consulting. I started this business in late 2023. It was just myself to start, but just as of last week, I hired 2 more folks, an operations lead and an AI developer. So very excited to triple the team and be able to add more capacity to clients in the AI space. So we help organizations align on, adopt, and integrate AI into their business. My background is continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. I'm an industrial engineer by nature. So AI is a skill set that I've picked up over the last couple of years and have done it daily. And that's our sole focus of the company. So helping companies adopt generative AI technologies. So yeah, with that, we've helped Digital Nova Scotia and Saint FX. We delivered a micro AI applied micro credential in the fall. So there's 92 participants that went through that, which was great. Mix of manufacturers, food processors, project managers. And we've also been working with impact organizations of Nova Scotia, and we've had 75 nonprofits go through that training and helping them apply AI and actually help it with their work and their workflows. So very excited to dig in, and I'll be sharing some more, I guess, tips and tricks as we go through some of the questions.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Robert. Thank you all for doing that. So we'll move to the panel part, and it's open season, guys. So you can all just kind of jump in as we go, and just have I'm hoping to have a nice discussion about this. I think a lot of people are here, and already you guys have already touched upon a lot of the important things, process, data, the idea that you have to, the CI concept that we deal with all the time, that Brennan kind of alluded to, that, you kind of have to know where you're headed before you worry about the technology part of it, which is really great. So let's start off with, and that's why we're here. We're here to talk about AI and digital transformation specifically, but as it relates to CI. When it comes to the pace of technology, many businesses, especially in rural areas like ours, they're small, they feel a bit overwhelmed by all of it. So what's one small practical step that they can do to kind of make that first step heading towards that digital transformation, if you will? What are those first steps? Anybody?
I can go there, Wade, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit in my intro, but I think it really does depend on sort of where you're at in the spectrum of maturity. So some will have adopted more, or could be described as having more process maturity in terms of systems that they're using, structure that's being applied. So I think it really, my answer would be it depends. But if you are in that sort of like emerging area, I think the very first thing that you can do, and I heard Brendan kind of talk about this too, is, start using spreadsheets, use Excel, use Copilot with Excel to do some analysis. You can add on Power BI, and there's even free licenses out there that can be used. So start to dabble in that, see sort of what it can do for you, how that sort of documenting of data, insights can be gleaned through the use of those additional sort of AI tools. For if you're a little bit more, further down the spectrum in terms of maturity, I would say one thing that you can really, really do is the very first thing I would do is map where your data lives. We call it data inventorying or data mapping. You can use a tool like Visio or Excel or something like that if you don't already have something like Tableau or Power BI in your organization. But just mapping where your data lives will sort of, I think, unearth some of the pain points that you have, with respect to AI opportunities. So if you can map where your data lives, understand how it's not speaking to each other, where you have redundancies, where you have duplications, that kind of thing. You can understand where you have opportunity. So from there, you can really start to describe what some of those pain points are within your organization, and where do you have processes that leverage that data. That's where you have an AI opportunity. So that's where you can really use AI to make the lives of your frontline people better, support decision making in better ways. So paired with that visualization of where your data sits and what those pain points are, you can start to introduce some AI solutions there. So whether it is, and there's different types of AI, as some of you will know, but whether that is generative AI, whether it is predictive analytics, or even if you have, a manufacturing or production style of industry, maybe it's using, computer visioning or something like that to look at your process, identify where you have defects or opportunities, something like that. So that's what I would say is start with sort of doing that inventorying of your data, either, documenting data if you're in that early stage, or documenting where your data lives. That's step one for me.
Okay. Robert.
Yeah, I'm assuming we'll just use the raise hand feature, but
Sure, that's perfect.
You could feel free to go to whoever. I'd take a slightly different approach, and this is just because my focus is on generative AI and using AI across the workforce. And I used to say, just play with it, just experiment with it, download Copilot, download ChatGPT, and just get started. But a lot of folks don't even know where to start and what to do and how it can help. So I'd say like the first most tactical step is just have a lunch and learn. Bring in an expert, anyone on this panel, or someone else that you might know that's, a bit of an expert in AI, and just have them demo and demonstrate what can be done with the tools, what can be done with Copilot, with Gemini, with ChatGPT, how much it can help, how simple it can be for a very inexpensive license or even for free. Talk about some of the risks, the safeguards that you need, what information shouldn't be shared with these tools, and what the risks are. So if you can get a little bit of guidance, a little bit of guidelines, and then showcase some of the benefits, you're going to inspire folks to say, I had no idea it could do that, or I had no idea it was that easy. And then they'll start figuring out what the solutions are, what the opportunities are, and the use cases. So the more folks that you can bring into that lunch and learn, have that shared learning, and gain some of that, engagement and buy-in, then you can kind of figure out where to go from there.
Excellent. Brennan.
Awesome. I agree with all those comments. Next time I go to talk about data, I gotta bring Trish. She's like the data. She's saying all the right things with on the data topic. That's great. So honestly, building off those two ideas we just talked about data and creating excitement and engagement, I think those are great points. You know, a suggestion from my perspective would be to tie whatever you do, tie it to some type of operational outcome and create a feedback loop, right? To say, okay, we're going to try to start measuring this or use Copilot or whatever tool to do this, and we're going to start measuring it. The first thing we're going to do is all sit in front of the screen and say it's completely wrong. Oh my gosh! But now, what that does is create a feedback loop. One way, the first way is we're going to say, okay, now we got some work to do on the data, okay, to clean it up. So next week we come to check on this. It's okay, it's a little bit better. It represents reality a little bit more, right? And then we start to get a feedback loop the other way, that the data starts telling us stuff about how to improve our operational outcomes, whether it's a team leader of accounts payable or whatever, it doesn't matter. Picture anyone who has a team of 3 or 4 people. Now we're doing both things. We're having a feedback loop here where our data is improving our operation, the feedback from how we interpret that data and understand it. It's giving feedback to how we enter the data, categorize it, transform it and manage it through AI or whatever. And that what you're doing is you're continually interleaving your operations and your data more and more through these feedback loops that you create by tying these into operational outcomes with your leaders across the business. And that's sort of part of the ideal goal here of a completely integrated organization and what we're after.
Excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Donnie. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I agree with what everybody's saying and just kind of build on it. For those of you that haven't ventured down the AI path at all, there's just a couple of things. You just sit back and make it simple. Think about things that are keeping you awake at night. What are those, repetitive tasks that are really kind of, sucking your time away during the week, the month that, takes you away from growing the business. And then, think about the data that you need. Like everybody's saying here, data is king. Think about that data that you need that's going to help you, make better decisions, more timely decisions. And then kind of sit back and say, okay, as a start, because AI is a bit like drinking from the fire hose. There's a lot out there. So, but there also is a lot of information. I think the beauty of AI is you can ask AI to give you help on what AI you need. So, sort of figure out one problem to start. Let's solve this one problem and then give it a try. Give it a try for a month. Select a tool. There's, as Robert mentioned, there's low cost and free tools out there. Try one and kind of track. I spend a lot of time doing this in the run of a week. I spend a lot of time creating, blogs or creating social media. Pick a tool like that and track the time that it saved me in the run of a month or so and recognize the ROI. Kind of go that path. It's a lot. And, for a company that does it, it's a lot for us to try and figure out what AI tools to use to help ourselves. So that would sort of be my recommendation as a start, if you're not doing it already.
Excellent, guys. Thank you very much for that. I do a lot of podcasting, and I always say it's one of my things I'm trying to move away from. But really, with everything you've said, there's a lot to unpack, and there really is. So I've got a couple of things, and we're starting to get questions through our question and answer button up there. And if anybody has some, feel free to put them there by all means. So I'll address that as well. But first off, somebody mentioned, of course, the idea of start with free and go to the paid. And you mentioned about, spending the $30 or whatever on things like Copilot. And my question to you guys would be, in terms of difference, is it worth it when you're starting out to go right to paying for ChatGPT or Copilot, or is it better to play around a little bit first?
I can start off here. Or sorry, Trish, you have your hand, or maybe you just want to.
I didn't raise my hand last time, Robert. So I just got it, so go for it.
Well, yeah, first person can speak up. The next one will do the hands. So yeah, I think, from the very beginning, you can just start with free, but chances are folks are already playing with the free AI tools anyway. Some are already experimenting with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Grok, whatever tools that are kind of their favorites. There are some advantages going to that $20 American per month subscription to ChatGPT or some of these other tools. It has more features. You can use deep research. You can access more things, and really $28 a month isn't that much, but I know once you multiply that across the entire organization, it can add up. So if you are looking at the paid tools, pick a small pilot group for those tools and get them to report back and share what they're doing. Copilot has the advantages of keeping that data and information within your tenant. So if you're putting files on SharePoint, you can trust that those files are not being, accessed. It's not being trained by the model. Copilot is not using your chat information to train their model to then be used. ChatGPT, if you're using it for free, then that training data can be used to train their model. So whenever it's free, you have to just be aware of some of the data security and privacy risks. But there's still going to be a lot of good use cases you can use on the free tools just to get people more comfortable with it and then to help prove the ROI for additional costs.
Okay, thank you. Trish?
Yeah, I was going to say same thing. I would start with the free tools that I would add. So the forum idea that Robert shared, I think I've seen that work really, really well. So different individuals using it for different use cases, and having a forum where you can share those use cases is really useful in those early stages. One other thing, if you have an opportunity to bring in a co-op student or an intern or someone like that who sort of becomes your AI steward for that period, that pilot period, that's really useful. So if there's any programs you can leverage to bring in additional support, where that person's sole kind of job is to look at how can this be used in our context, that is a great way to bring in a really low cost resource who's dedicated to that.
Yeah, sometimes free, at least for periods of time. I know we get requests every year from the NSCC asking for, if there were spots for students that we could, use to accommodate, and that certainly is a great position. Dustin Atkinson, first off, just thank you for all the questions, and we're going to address some of that because it's leading right to what you're asking particularly. When everybody signed up, they had an opportunity to put a question in initially, and I'm going to start with that one, but he's also put a couple of questions in the question and answer part. So I'm going to start with, and it's kind of been touched on at least, but this comes originally from the original questions before everything started. And Dustin wrote, when working in an advisor client role, what precautions are taken to ensure that clients are aware information is being used in AI programs? So I guess it's that privacy issue. Trish?
I don't want to monopolize this question. So we are a professional services firm, and so there's a few different sort of scenarios for us. So at the proposal stage, when we're actually sharing, our approach, our recommended approach, that kind of thing, if we feel that the use of AI is beneficial in that instance, we will share that as part of the approach. We'll say what tools, techniques we would use, in what context, and why, and what we're going to do to protect their information through that process as well. So that, if at that stage, we can go in eyes wide open, and client can make a decision based on that. If through delivery we recognize that AI could be beneficial in some way, we will share that in advance of using it and get a really explicit agreement on that. I think, for us in general, as a professional services firm, we would use it, typically in the run of a day of some of our administrative and enabling processes. So example would be, forms where we would request information and we're going to aggregate that information using AI on the back end. we would put a policy statement, and we would ask people to opt in to that collection of data and explain the context we're going to use it in. So I think there's a variety of things that you can do, but transparency, explicit documenting of that, and sharing of the intent and the purpose and the way it's going to be used as much as possible, that, you do that as much as you can.
Perfect. Thank you. Brennan.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. Another way to picture this is that if nothing works in isolation, a lot of these, if I'm understanding the question correctly, might be at this crossroads of technology and process and people, meaning that, let's say, and it depends what the process is too, but let's say AI is helping us come up with a price. So we'll leave text for another conversation, but coming up with a price, well, maybe we also have some type of automation that says, hey, we've done our homework, we're okay with this tolerance for risk, and so we also build in some type of segmentation to say, okay, it's coming up with a price, we're 80% confident, and it's within 3% of the last price we had for this customer. Therefore, we're gonna green light that and let the customer buy it at that price or whatever. Whereas, you might, again, there's some homework on the business's part here too, to come up with what's our tolerance for risk, right? That's really the question. And how do we operationalize the control of that risk, right? That's really the question, or at least how I'm interpreting the question. And so, yeah, it's, a crossroads of what's AI doing for us? What's the variation in its output? How do we understand that? What type of variation is acceptable to us in terms of risk? Is it price, or is it coming up with a customer service response to someone? What's our tolerance for that being accurate or appropriate? And so, maybe a boring answer, but it is sort of it depends scenario on understanding what the range of results you can get are, and what your tolerance is for those and what they mean to the customer, and then maybe mixing that with a process component of making sure that we have some process control and check that things are either approved if they're above some certain threshold, or if it's a long text or an important client, or there's all these different ways to introduce risk mitigation controls into processes to help with stuff like this.
Excellent. Thank you. And Robert.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, if I am the advisor and you are the client, I will be using AI in our work, unless it is confidential, private type of information. So we can kind of go through that structure and stuff, but the ability it has to augment and to make the work that much more beneficial, higher quality, clear. There's so many advantages to layer AI into all areas of the work. So very clear and transparent about that. If there is private information, we actually have our own local large language model. Our AI developers running off a $7,000 MacBook, super powerful, not accessed through the web. So if there are some things that we need to do to leverage AI, we have local models, so you don't have to worry about the privacy or the confidentiality component of it. And I think the other big thing here is just training and awareness. I know a lot of folks are worried about, oh, are you using AI? Well, yes, or maybe, but you can use it very effectively. So no, you don't have to worry about data security or other of those elements. If you have information that's on the website, the large language models already know that. So some of the components is just the training with some of the fear and some of the misinformation and misconceptions about using AI.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do the other question, and there's kind of a 1 and 2, but I'll kind of put them all together from Dustin again. How do you navigate a review process to ensure that AI processes are working effectively without significant error? And 2, how do you manage that in a client-based firm and dealing with many employees that are using AI programs? And whoever wants to, well, Brennan, there we go. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out my mistake. That's the question I was responding to a second ago. So some confusion on that. I thought we're going off the Q&A. No problem.
Okay, no problem. Trish.
So I was muted. I I think that in instances like that, I think you need to have sort of a maker checker process. So I believe AI is very powerful, but there should be some quality assurance involved in that. So I think a human really does need to verify the output and have some accountability for what the AI produces. And again, I'll be a broken record. I'll go back to the data because if you provide, and I think, Donnie used the term garbage data, garbage in, garbage out. If you're, if that maker checker kind of relationship with the AI can really help you to uncover opportunities for improving your data inputs to your AI models, because it does highlight where you have either inconsistencies, gaps in the data, etc. So it's beneficial in a lot of ways, not just to catch quality errors, but also to identify themes and how you can improve the model through better data input. So I think that's a really integral piece of your process whenever you're instituting AI, is have a checkpoint where a human is looking at it at a point in the process that makes sense.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And Robert.
Yeah, I would echo what Trish says. Yeah, I don't use the term as much maker checker, but like the same thing, having a human in the loop, being able to review and check all of the AI outputs, never taking it at face value and making sure there's a human touch and element to what's coming from the AI, I think is extremely important. You can also use AI or AI agents to check AI. So if you have multiple, whether you're using different systems, different large language models, or have developed specific AI agents to review each other, you can give it an objective, kind of give it a role, and it will perform that role and kind of check another system's output. So that can be really powerful. Also recommend setting like benchmarks and evaluations, called evals in the AI world. So if a new model comes out, so say Copilot's gone through an upgrade or ChatGPT has released a new reasoning model, that you're going through and checking your previous use cases against the new model, because things can break or things may not perform as well as they're making their model changes. So having that framework and those evaluations in place just to make sure things are still stable as these models evolve and change.
Excellent. Donnie.
So just to echo what Robert and Trish were saying, human in the loop is huge right now in the AI process. So a lot of companies, manufacturing companies, should use AI for things like a flaw detection. So AI is just learning based on data before, we still need a human in the loop to kind of validate that sort of thing. So keeping in AI assisted process, humans still needs to be there at this point in the game to validate all that. Now, small, medium-sized businesses are using that advanced of an AI, tools. Maybe not. So but I suggest that humans always there to validate what the information is that's being spit out, because as Robert and Trish both said, if the data is not perfectly good, then there's going to be some information that's spit out from the AI that needs to be checked or tweaked. So.
Okay. Brennan.
Yeah, so I might take a second shot at answering this question by accident. I think the reaction to that from the group might be, well, what's the point here? We got to get humans to review all this stuff anyway, and that can be overwhelming. Like depending on like all the different industries folks are involved in, like we could have transactional levels that are, we're doing 1 million transactions here. What's the point of using AI to come up with the sales price or whatever your example is? I guess I wanted to point out that there are some creative and interesting ways to find a middle ground there. Like I kind of alluded to this earlier too, is, in simple terms, yeah, we want a human in the loop. Maybe not for everything. maybe it's for certain customers that get special treatment because we don't want to lose them, or maybe it's above a certain price point or order size or quantity, or maybe it's just we do some sampling and the human checks every second one or every 10th one or every 100th one, and we use that feedback to make sure we're coming back and, as we say in the loop, to give feedback to how the process is operating. So I guess I just want to throw that out there, that can be a discouraging notion to think that a human has to check everything, but there's lots of ways to get creative with that can be really effective and have a really great sort of risk reward trade-off in terms of how much human needs to be involved and how much risk you can mitigate.
Okay. Robert.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add, because when we're talking about AI, I'm assuming most times we're talking about generative AI, like ChatGPT and these other models. But there's definitely other types of artificial intelligence, like machine learning is a type of AI where you don't have to worry about the checks and balances as much because it's very deterministic. It's based on a set of rules and a set of logic that it's going to follow through. Where generative AI, it's a bit of a black box. It's a next word predictor as far as the answers that are generated and the text that's provided. So that requires a lot more trust and a lot more verification in those senses. So, just because if you might be hearing kind of slightly different answers, that's a big reason why.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it all depends on what business you're in and what you're trying to achieve with that AI. Donnie.
So I know we're talking a lot about different types of AI, and Robert's alluded to generative AI and machine learning. And I said the point right now is that AI, you need to set guardrails, for any type of AI you're putting in place. And so for example, we're around risk. We're working right now with a company that does works with fish harvesters. So it's underwater. They're doing underwater video, and right now they're taking that video and counting the fish that are being transferred manually. So we're developing an AI tool for them to be able to, a computer vision tool, to be able to take that video, run through an AI model, and it counts it automatically. So now we're talking about machine learning, because at this point now, the more video, the more data that's fed to that AI model, the better it gets, So the less the risk goes down and down as the tool gets better at identifying the fish. So that's an example of what Robert's saying about machine learning, is that if there's the guardrails are there already, the machine is learning it. There's less human intervention that needs to happen as the tool gets better. So I guess to summarize, yes, all of the AI tools you need some kind of guardrail, because AI is kind of wide open.
Perfect. Okay. Trish.
Yeah, just on the subject of, the guardrails that Donnie mentioned, I think, creating some governance, governance light even initially when you're introducing AI is really, really critical. So I know the second part of Dustin's question was around, how do we manage this in these types of firms where we have lots of people using it? We need to create some guardrails, as Donnie said, like what are the approved applications of this? But not just that, I think, stewards and accountability are really critical. So ultimately, who owns the data in this system? Who owns this report? Who owns this output of, or the communications that we're using as an output from generative AI, those types of things. If we're using machine learning to improve our model in some way, who owns that? Who's ultimately accountable? I think if we have sort of a buck stops here type of approach and model, you can get ahead of some of those things, because that's creating sort of a risk-based framework where we can now assess what is okay. We have somebody accountable to that, and we can start to have those conversations about how we can improve, or de-risk the processes of that quality checking, or what scenarios it might be useful for, et cetera. So I know Matthew has a comment on that too, and I think it segues nicely into that.
All right, well, thank you for that lead in, because that's what I'm about to do is read that for everyone again, and remind anybody, if you have a question, you want to join in, by all means, please just put it in there and we'll hit you from there. Matthew asks, how would you assess whether a process should be human-based with AI augmentation, staff using a tool, versus supposedly directly by an AI agent with human oversight? And as a part of that, are there common functions in organizations that generally lend themselves to one category or the other?
Yeah, I can take the first shot at this
Sure.
because I was the one that brought up AI agents in the first place. So I think it less depends on certain functions and really an organization's AI maturity. I would never recommend jumping in with an organization that's, just starting their journey with generative AI and Copilot or ChatGPT and say, you know what, we're going to start building AI agents. We're going to start automating a lot of this work and replacing human tasks where they're now overviewing and doing quality checks on the work versus actually doing the work. I would start with augmenting with generative AI and kind of using them as a co-pilot, co-creator, kind of working together with AI to get the output before building and leveraging AI agents. There's a lot of risk with AI agents. It takes a lot of time. It's not something that you can pick up necessarily that quickly, although there's lots of YouTube videos out there. But it is something that you want to kind of start and build your way up. But based on that, once you get to that maturity, then it's just an ROI calculation, if you want to make it that way, where AI agents can do the work quickly, and then you can have a human reviewer. There are lots of simple tasks where you can use AI agents, but as soon as you need that critical thinking, that human element of making decisions, where AI may not be able to kind of make those nuance or judgments, that you need to slowly work your way up to that.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Trish.
Yeah, I would echo what Robert said in some ways. I would say generally though, there are some better scenarios or use cases for certain types of AI versus others. So example, if you have KPIs within your organization and things that are really fundamental to the business and business critical, predictive analytics that's a perfect case for a use case for predictive analytics. Almost every administrative process can benefit from generative AI in some way. If you have, a website where you get a lot of, frequently asked questions, that kind of thing, or you get a lot of service calls or something like that. That's a great example of where a chatbot using NLP could be applied. So, but again, I would echo what Robert said, which is I would never recommend, a business of 5 that gets, 5 calls a day or something like that to start to introduce chatbots necessarily. So it's where you start to ask the question, okay, so we need to scale this, or we're not able to keep up with this type of demand of questions or responses and communications. It's based on pain points. It's always going to be based on pain points. If you're having difficulty making decisions or responding to demand, that's a great time to start to ask yourself what kind of AI solution can be introduced for that specific pain point. And then I would say there are specific use cases that would be more applicable in some scenarios versus others.
Perfect. Thank you. Donnie.
So just to follow on, to what Trish and Robert both saying, and as I mentioned earlier, just understanding where you're spending all your time on repetitive tasks, and is there a possibility to use an AI agent, or any AI technique to eliminate that and automate that? That's a quick hit with some ROI. Robert mentioned earlier, track what you're doing. And so you can measure that ROI over a short period of time. Start small, and do a proof of concept, and then scale it up if it's working for you.
Perfect. Robert.
Yeah, I wanted to say like there are kind of levels between AI agents and agentic AI and just using AI. Like you might be able to create a custom GPT to help do some automations or like a Google Gem or a Copilot agent. You might be able to use Notebook LM and dump files in there. So there's a lot of different processes, tools, and techniques between just using the chat interface of ChatGPT and then building a full-blown agent.
All right. Thank you guys for that. That was a great discussion. I really appreciate it. I've got a question from Neil McKenzie, and Neil and I have worked together a lot. Neil works in tourism. He's the executive director of our local tourism organization, or DMO. And I've also served on that board. And a lot of what we do is with Basecamp when we're doing projects. So Neil, when he signed up, asked if we could talk about interfacing with LLCs and other AI and project management systems like Basecamp and best practices with analytics, analysis, and action with using AI. That's a lot. Trish.
I have a little bit of experience just specifically in using Basecamp for process improvement. So not the Basecamp, but in a marketing kind of context, they were using Basecamp for project management. And one of the significant gaps, and I think this is really going to vary depending on the sort of project management tool that you're using, because some are a little bit more sophisticated, like Asana, like Jira, etc. So you wouldn't see the same type of issue. But I will tell you, just based on that and using Basecamp as the example, some of the limitations of a project management software like Basecamp, when we're thinking about AI and how we can use the data that's in these systems for interfacing with AI to get the insights that we can glean from that, is some of the challenges that I've seen is like gaps in information. So for example, this project was looking at specifically how can we improve our lead time, our project lead time. And it's difficult to mine data from a system like Basecamp because there was gaps in metadata. So for example, we're missing start dates and end dates, or we're using different formats and that kind of thing. So I think, in those cases, something like Jira, where you have mandatory, fields and things like that, and things have to be done in a very specific format, it prevents those kinds of issues from happening. And so you're more ready to move into AI, integration with those types of things. But I would say, if you wanted to start with an example like a software where it's simple like Basecamp, and you want to use the insights from that to glean what you can about your process, about your data insights, then I would recommend, you get the Excel export, you see where you're missing data, start with the data cleanup, and then you can start to use that in a more systematic way. So remember to use your systems and software in a consistent way, so people are inputting the data fields that are really critical to your insights. They're doing it on a regular basis, and that you are checking that they are doing it, because then you're going to be able to use the power of that data when you're ready for it, and use any number of different kinds of AI tools to help you with that. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but that was the context where we looked at Basecamp specifically in the past.
Okay, thank you for that. Robert.
Wholeheartedly agree with the clean data and making sure you have those elements kind of built in. Not as familiar with Basecamp. We're using ClickUp. And what I'm seeing with a lot of project management tools is they're integrating AI specifically in that tool. So they have the APIs, so they're leveraging ChatGPT, OpenAI models or other models, and then you can use the power of ChatGPT within the project management system. So you could put in like a task title, and then for description, you could just click a button and it's going to give you a description. So if you're looking to leverage that, you might want to look at other project management tools that are leveraging AI. My guess is Basecamp will start to bring that functionality in-house, so you don't have to worry about jumping back and forth between tools. But if you are right now, there are systems like Make.com, Zapier, N8N, where you can tie these automations into other tools and use the APIs. So you can say, well, if I add a task in Basecamp, I also want to send a message in Slack. If that integration isn't happening there built into the system, you can then use these other tools to make those connections. So that might be another option to leverage the power of AI if it's not already built in.
Okay, thank you for that. A lot of names getting thrown around, and it leads me to my next question. We have questions also on our Q&A, but I'll get to that in a sec because we were just talking about tourism. But for sections, when you're dealing with sectors like tourism or manufacturing or fisheries, those are huge in our region. What kinds of tech or AI tools right now are showing real promise when it comes to those different sectors?
So I mean, I can mention a couple of things that we've seen. So in production-based sort of food processing types of environments, so using some of the, and you don't hear this talked about quite as much. It's not as widely adopted here in Nova Scotia yet, but things where you can capture an image of a process and have AI look at the image and identify defects, that kind of thing. So example, on a production line, if you have a standard that or inventory management system or something like that, and you have a standard of what things should look like or what your minimum thresholds are. So if you can say sort of what good should be, what good looks like, and you can use AI to create that standard and then input images of what the current state is, it can actually compare those two states and tell you what the discrepancy is or what the gap is. And so that's a great example of in a production-based kind of sector where they're actually producing a physical product where they're using AI in that application. So that would be probably appropriate for, fish processing, that kind of thing.
Perfect, thank you. Brennan. I'm not hearing you. I didn't think you were muted, but maybe you are. Trying to fix you there. Mute, unmute. Okay, try now. I'm sorry. We've lost you.
That's bizarre.
Okay, he's going to fix that. Robert.
Yeah, I'll jump in as hopefully Brennan's able to figure that out. I would just say there's a lot that could be done with the frontier models like ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini. So it doesn't matter whether you're in tourism, manufacturing, fisheries. If you spend your time on a computer answering emails in meetings, there's a lot that these models can do. So they might not be industry specific or problem specific or necessarily something that's on the manufacturing line, but you can get data from a lot of that. It can help analyze data. It can help generate memos, reports, research, like the deep research functionality. If you haven't tried it, give it a go on Gemini, or if you have the paid subscription on ChatGPT. There's a lot of things that is industry agnostic that these big frontier models can help with.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I hear
Gotcha.
We hear you.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, I agree with Robert. I'm actually going to refer to something he said in the previous conversation. Like Robert was discussing these sort of levels of AI, so like sort of agentic AI, and down to sort of the simple user interfacing with ChatGPT or what have you. I'm going to go out on a limb here on this question to say, let's consider even lower levels, maybe not lower, different levels of technology apart from AI too. I mean, I think the reality is that for a lot of businesses, if we start to use your word, Wade, unpack what's happening and what their goals are and what their challenges are and where the opportunities are, there might be some higher priorities than AI, right? And so, but even just sticking in the vein of technology alone, like, a major revelation in the in the last 5-10 years have been these sort of third-party reporting.
We've lost you again.
Oh
Your microphone is being fussy. Sorry, man. Okay. The gremlins are active. How do you diagnose a client when it comes to upgrading technology? And we were kind of talking about this before, at least touching on it. Do you have certain products that you recommend, or is the research based on a client's specific needs? Donnie.
And so, so if we're going to do an assessment of the client, we wouldn't, we certainly don't walk in with a preconceived notion of what the products are they're going to use. So it's talking about understanding the business. So that's so important. It's to understand the business before you get into a digital transformation. What's the business model? What are the key processes? And what their strategic vision is, where they want to go, or are they going into a huge growth mode, or does their IT infrastructure need to be scalable? So that's sort of the scenario. Understand the business, understand the current IT structure, and how it supports the business, and then where you're going and where their opportunities are. So where are the opportunities to do, to improve data management? Where are the opportunities for cybersecurity? And then finally, where are the opportunities for AI? And that's when we kind of get to the point. Okay, so we've identified opportunities for AI. That will dictate where we would do the research and understand what kind of AI tool is going to be best for you and your situation is well, everybody's cost is big on everybody's list, but it's that flexibility of the type of money you have available for an AI tool. Robert, everybody's been alluding to there's the free base, there's some low cost ones that can have a large impact. So that's sort of the process that we would go through, and we have been going through.
Yeah, and it's a really good point too. We've talked a lot about AI, but when you're talking about the grander scale of AI and digital transformation, it's not all about AI necessarily. So that's a really good point. Thank you, Trish. And then let's see if Brennan's good. Trish.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the diagnosis part of it can be fairly prescriptive in terms of the way you approach it. So I think, we would probably all of us have, a distinct approach when we go in to do the diagnosis part of it. But then when it comes up, comes time to, I think the format of it could be a little bit different depending on context. The scope of it would be a little bit different depending on context. But almost 100% of the time, the recommendations will be very, very aligned to customer needs. So, and not just needs, but the context of that client. So, talked a little bit about, the maturity. So, what are you doing today? What are your goals? Maybe for somebody, it's just to offset the cost of something or cost avoidance. Others, it might be we need to position ourselves for scale. Others, it might be we need to stop, the bleeding some way. We need to be able to do more with what we have today in terms of resources. So we'd be looking at your resource complement. We'd be looking at your goals. We'd be looking at, your abilities and what your current, resource makeup looks like in order to determine what those specific recommendations look like. So I think it's sort of, I would say it's the diagnosis part of it is fairly repetitive, but different in terms of the context, but the recommendation piece is always going to be a little bit different.
Excellent, thank you. Brennan, how's it going?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page as everyone on this one. I mean, the questions we have to ask ourselves are, where is your business now? Where's the industry going? Where do you want to take your organization? Those are sort of fundamental precursors to these types of conversations. Determining a roadmap for your technology for your organization can be a huge endeavor depending on the size and complexity and all this stuff. But I'll say something that was relevant to the previous question too, which is that, I think AI is amazing. It's incredible and very much can serve, as Trish mentioned, in several different ways, but almost every administrative process can be served through some of this sort of what I call light duty AI, more generative AI, because Donnie mentioned some of the more heavy duty versions are using machine learning and data processing and all stuff like that. So that being said, I've never encountered an organization where their top technology priority is AI. Like, so we think about, so I do work in the seafood and these industries that were brought up. I mean, or things are moving fast and changing fast, right? So this is a challenging topic. There are, no one has reached full maturity on being mastering technology. In fact, far from it. So I would say most organizations are at, 4/10 of the way there, right? And so there's these fundamental pieces that are likely missing. If I had to bet my money, I'm betting that there's some fundamental pieces of technology and process missing that we should probably focus on first and then think about optimizing those with AI. Or we focus on those fundamental pieces of value creation in your products and services, and at the same time support your administrative functions with generative AI and sort of the light duty pieces. It really depends on your industry whether your value creation can be supported or whether it's a strategic priority for you to use heavy duty AI in your value creation, your provision of services and all that stuff. So it's a complicated area. I agree with these folks. I think it's going to be a two-part answer, no matter what, when these recommendations come your way, is that there's going to be, hey, we need to do some foundational work here around data, process, et cetera. But also, hey, we can get started and sort of grease the track on some of this administrative stuff.
Excellent. Thank you. Robert, and then Trish. Robert.
Yeah, I was going to echo the same as Brennan there. I think your digital transformation roadmap should be separate from your AI roadmap because they are two completely different technologies. Your digital transformation, they're going to be long, heavy, often expensive projects, and they're going to be core to your business. Very important. But AI roadmap, AI is changing so quick. It's evolving so fast. You can't sketch out a roadmap of more than a year or two because the technology is always changing. You need to be agile. You need to be iterative. You need to be building that foundational skill set right from the beginning. So I would suggest, creating, if you want to do the digital transformation roadmap, depending where you are in your organization, very important, but separate that from AI because it's completely different. You're using the technology differently. It's growing so much faster, and you can get some quick wins from it immediately.
Trish.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring in, so, we're all consultants, and I think, this panel would agree with me that we have our ear to the ground. We're watching trends of what's happening in industry, that kind of thing. We're attending conferences, we're reading all the sound bites and the newsletters and that kind of thing. One thing that I know I'm hearing is, to be competitive moving forward, every single industry needs to look at exponential growth. That's the theme that we're hearing, is that they want to achieve exponential growth. So people are looking at how to reinvent their businesses, and it needs to achieve exponential growth. It needs to look exponentially different than it does today. So, speaking to what Robert was just mentioning, that digital transformation, it is transforming your business. The AI piece might be a part of your roadmap at the end of the day, but again, it is sort of like a lot of times what we're seeing the application of that today is how do we use this to alleviate some of these pain points. That's just trying to meet your current demand. That exponentially different part of it, that raising the bar and looking entirely different, that's going to be an entirely different can of worms. We're going to need to approach our businesses completely differently in the future.
Right. Okay. Donnie.
So Trish just stole my thunder.
Sorry.
I was about to say the same thing. So in the process of developing our digital roadmap, the AI, tools would be part of it, but also would be a process in there of saying, okay, you've got to revisit this often. As Robert said, it's changing so quickly, and you have to revisit it and kind of do that continuous improvement process of saying, okay, so, and that has to be part of your continuous improvement. So what tools are out there? How can we better do this? Is there AI opportunity to make our process better? Any digital roadmap that we would do would not just talk about, your technology and where you should go, that long play that Robert was talking about is for digital transformation. We'd also talk about what are the things we have to do on a consistent basis, continuous improvement, and say, okay, so, we're monitoring it. We need to get better at this. And yeah, there's opportunities out there. Are there opportunities, re-engineering our process, or is there opportunities and tools like AI? So, that would be part of any, digital roadmap we did, would be that framework to say, these are the things from a continuous improvement perspective that you need to do.
Excellent. We're starting to run out of time. I wanted to ask one more question. It's just something, it was brought up only kind of in passing. And I know we've concentrated a lot on AI and ended with digital transformation, but let's talk a little bit very quickly about cybersecurity. What should businesses actually worry about? What's just noise that you're hearing all over the place? Is how important is that cybersecurity piece for small to medium-sized businesses?
I think Robert touched on this earlier, but I think, data leakage is definitely a concern. So we're hearing things, we heard about the Nova Scotia Power one recently. We've heard about others. So I think things like that, those are top of mind, definitely when it comes to risk. And so asking yourself, how does AI play, a part in this? If we're we're collecting data, we're using AI to tell us some things about that data set. We need to understand what the risks are that are involved with that. And as Robert said, that's going to look very different depending on what AI application you're using. So I think going in eyes wide open, understanding what the risks are with each of the tools that you're intending to use, and how much risk you're willing to take. Who that risk is to. Is it, client? Is it, internal, IP, etc. So I think you have to kind of do a bit of a risk analysis to ask yourself, it's specifically when it comes to data, what you're willing to, what kind of risk there may be in this scenario, and what you should do about it to mitigate it.
Excellent. Donnie.
Yeah, and I agree with everything Trish is saying. Just to add on to it, these days cybersecurity is not an option; it's a necessity. But it's relative to the size of business you have, the types of data that you're storing. So AI is a game changer. If you're starting to use AI tools now, you're starting to deal with AI. There's no boundaries on AI. So, I think Robert mentioned earlier, if you can contain AI, maybe put that air barrier, depending on the type, what you're using AI for. So, you're just using basic AI, but you need to do that risk assessment no matter what. What are you using AI for? Who's using AI in your organization? What are the types of things, data that they're putting out there or requesting, asking information on. So that risk assessment, whether it's a basic one, if you're a small business, or, if you're a little bit larger business and you're using more complex AI, you really have to get your head around, what the risk is out there. And I believe that's just sort of a build on what, the other three panelists were saying today.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for taking the time to join in on this. And to anybody who is watching this and is part of this webinar, who's talking or thinking about joining us as part of this, you have an opportunity to work with these consultants individually as part of our CI programs here at the Western REN. And I'll open it up to Keval to kind of do some closing remarks and sum things up as we wrap it all up today.
Thanks for pointing that out, Wade. It was actually something I thought of during the session that I forgot to mention, that our consultants today are our actual CI consultants. So Thank you. Thanks everyone. To quickly wrap up, and hopefully you guys are leaving today more informed and not more overwhelmed. It's a lot of information. And for me, I think a key takeaway is to start small, strategic focus on one area that, you know, you can build momentum from there. And if you're not sure where to start, that's where we come in. So if you think a CI project sounds right for your business, or if you'd like information on the process, you can reach out to me. And as Wade mentioned, we'll be sending us out after with all our information for contacting. And thanks again to our panelists for sharing your insights, and Wade for moderating, and to all our participants.
All right, so
Thank you.
what I will do is I'll save this and forward it to everyone who has registered. So you will have a copy of this. Thank you all very much to Donnie, Robert, Brennan, Trish. Really appreciate your time, and for all of you for joining us in. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to bring this to you. I hope it helped. And if you have any questions, if you have anything that you want as far as it goes, just forward it to us, and we'll make sure that that gets taken care of as well. So have a great one, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you soon.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.